What's up, guys? Welcome to the Coding Shack, where I write codes inside of a shack. Alright guys, so here we have these three plugins that I'm going to be going over today. The reason I picked these plugins is because I've actually used all three of these before in projects I've made, and I personally had great experiences with them. So I'm going to go over them and tell you basically the pros and cons of each and what kind of application I use with them. And there are also other multiplayer options. These are just the ones that I have some experience with, and I would love to share that. Alright guys, so we're going to start out with this Bluetooth networking plugin. So this is something I found in the Unity asset store, and I'm going to drop the links down below for all the plugins I used in this video. But yeah, pretty much it's super easy to set up. You don't even need a server, because what happens is one of the phones that you play with act as the server, and then another one of the phones acts as a client. And in the world of Bluetooth, you're basically gonna have like peripherals, right? Peripherals, and then the host is kind of like a central, right? So the peripherals, like the central, will basically connect to the peripherals. But anyways, this plugin was going to abstract away a lot of the complicated central peripheral slang that we're using, and it's going to be more like a host and a join. And they're going to have commands that basically, like, you can send data and receive data, and it's almost the easiest way to, I think personally, to set up a connection between two devices. So yeah, it also provides the capability to transfer data between iOS and Android devices. So in the past, I built like a native iOS Bluetooth, and I don't know how I would connect that to an Android device, but this plugin takes care of it. So it's cross-compatible between iOS and Android, which is cool, as Unity is a cross-platform game engine as well. And another thing is you don't need Wi-Fi or data to connect, so you don't have to worry about that. Here is basically just like a game I made. I did make a video about this particular game showing how the plugin actually works, so feel free to check that out. But now we're going to move on to some of the cons why you might not want to use this plugin. So basically, we have a limit of sending commands. So Bluetooth is basically like a little radio in your phone, and if you give it too much to do, it's gonna freak out and you might like miss commands or something. So Bluetooth is not as powerful as like Wi-Fi, for example, or the data on your phone. So you're gonna have a limit of sending commands, and you're gonna want to put a break between commands you send. So you're gonna almost want to limit it to like 7 commands per second to be safe, right? Because you want to make sure when you're networking, all the commands get sent across the two devices. So also, it gives a possibility for multiple players and connections, but it's most likely going to be flaky once you start adding too many. So in my own projects, I've limited down to just like 2 devices connecting. And I personally, I care about reliability in my apps, and I wouldn't want to risk like losing data packets, right? You're also going to need to be close to other players to avoid losing data. So I did make one game, like one app that was kind of a scorekeeping thing. And what happened is, when it was like a scorekeeping for an outdoor yard game, when the phones got too far apart, sometimes data packets would get lost because it's not as reliable as when it's closer together. So another thing is, if you're using something with more of like a Wi-Fi based, it's less likely that you're gonna lose commands due to not being close to someone else, right? Because you're actually talking to a server. And that brings us into our next networking plugin, which is Google Firebase. So this is another one that I used. It's really cool. This one's actually handled by Google, so it's a little more reliable, because all your commands and stuff that you send go through the Google server, and then Google's going to make sure that you actually get your commands delivered to the other people that are connected in the game, right? So another bright side is all the complicated back-end server stuff is handled directly by Google, so you actually won't even have to write server-side code, but basically, like, your client, so your Unity app on your phone, is going to be able to access the server stuff. So it's going to be able to access and use it, and if you do want to do some server-side stuff, there's also options for that, but it's all built in like the console, which is like a Google Firebase like interactive thing on the website. You can go in, and I think it's a great way to learn about basic server stuff without having to get into nitty gritty and write like SQL and have some sort of like actual back end scripting, right? So another thing, okay, yeah, we talked about the reliable data transfer, obviously, because you're bouncing through the server, and that's kind of when you have a server and you're actually sending data through there, that's when you get more reliable data transfer as well. So we're also going to talk about saving data in the server, right? Because in Bluetooth, it's just like a one-time connection. You connect between two phones, but it just like for the time they're connected, then once they disconnect, where does data get saved? Like if you have a high score or leaderboard, like where does that get saved? Like it's only those two phones are going to be able to have the data, right? For some games, it's important to keep like player accounts or like stats or leaderboards. For that, you need to have a place, like a server, where you store those stats, right? And if that's important for you or something like that, you're going to need an option with the server. And Google Firebase is a great way to get started with this because you're going to be storing like certain game data that's important in the cloud. So yeah, we have that aspect of it. We also have the aspect that you're going to be able to actually handle multiple players and connections because it's going through the Google servers, and it's going to be less flaky than the Bluetooth option. So we also have really great documentation. So if you go ahead on the Google Firebase website, you can see they have tutorials directly for Unity and how you can actually get it integrated into your project. And now to move on to some of the cons, one of the big cons is you can't test it in Unity. So you can't directly test it. It's only for like mobile platforms. So the workaround for this is you're going to have to build the project to a simulator, right? If you're iOS gang, you're in Xcode. If you're Android gang, Android Studio, and you open up your simulator, and if there are ways to open up basically two devices side to side, right? And that's probably the best way to do it. So like going the Xcode, you're gonna run two devices, have them side to side, and you can test all the networking in the simulator. And I didn't talk about this either, but for Bluetooth, a downside is you have to download it to the physical device. So Bluetooth, you can't really, for some reason, you can't test Bluetooth in Xcode. You might be able to do Android Studio. I'm not sure though, but basically, yeah, you're going to have to, first of all, build the project all the way to Xcode, and then you're going to have to build it a second time from Xcode to your physical device. So that's two steps for Bluetooth. Google Firebase is one step, right? You build it from Unity to Xcode, and then you can run it, right? And now another downside quick of Google Firebase is the pay per data usage. So they do have rates where it's like using a certain amount of data usage for your server is free, but once you exceed that, you're gonna have to start paying. And it's like, this doesn't have to be a problem, but if you write like poorly optimized code that's constantly like trying to reach the server, then you might end up paying a lot. Also, if you have a ton of users, you might you basically will have to scale up your costs, of your server. So that's another downside. So that brings us to our final networking plugin today, and that's going to be Mirror. So Mirror, aside from like Google Firebase now, it's something that's actually developed by Unity developers, and it was made actually once the Unity built-in networking UNet got deprecated. Like Unity stopped working on it for some reason, and the developers who had games were starting to be built in UNet, they created Mirror, which is like the clutch plugin that would save all the developers, right, that are trying to make money off their games, right? So you have a big community of people backing Mirror, which is cool. Yeah, it's on the Unity Asset Store. There's a ton of great reviews. And it's also aside from Firebase and Bluetooth, it's built to actually handle lots of players. So if you're less in the realm of little turn-based phone games and you want to get into making an MMORPG or some bigger, more heavy-duty games, you're probably going to want to invest your time into learning something like Mirror. And there are other ones like Photon and stuff like that. but you can, if you're into that, you should definitely go check that out. So this is another really cool thing. I actually never made like a MMORPG, like a big game like that. But my favorite thing about Mirror is it lets you basically test your game right inside of Unity. And there's a guy on YouTube named Shrine, and he has some good tutorials, and he shows how to set up this plugin called ParrelSync, where now you can actually open up 2 instances of your game in Unity inside the editor, right? And now you can test it directly inside of Unity. And why this is so awesome is because in Bluetooth, you have to build your project and then download it to your device. Sometimes your build time can take up to like 30 minutes, which is terrible, right? You want to be able to quickly test your game. In this, you write some code and instantly you can test it right inside of Unity. And that's probably the most beautiful thing about Mirror, right? The cons now on the other side is it's a higher learning curve. You're gonna have to learn while it's still the server side stuff is still kind of like built into Unity, so you don't have to write separate code. You're still going to have to, like, if you want it to be playable like anywhere in the world, you're going to have to put in the work to set up like AWS or some other sort of server. But that's beyond me. I've never done something like that, but that's what you would basically have to do to learn that. And yeah, that's basically that's Mirror for you. Some good networking plugin. Yeah. Alright guys, now to show you a quick example of an app I'm actually making that uses networking in it is my app Planet Pawn, which is coming soon. A beta is coming soon to iOS and Android actually. But you can see it's kind of like a scorekeeper for beer pong. And how it's using Bluetooth is when you start a new game, the 2 phones can connect to each other, and then you know you're playing a game of Pawn, so the phones are right next to each other, and it's a perfect use case for the Bluetooth. I'm also though using Google Firebase because when players are done with their games, they can actually save their stats from their games to the cloud. So that's where the Google Firebase comes in. And finally, I also do use Mirror because to do the Bluetooth, you have to download it to the phones, which for me, it takes a while to actually download the app to my phone every time. But I was able to kind of replicate the Bluetooth networking I had in Mirror, so when I'm testing the networking on my computer, I can use Mirror instead of the Bluetooth. And I can also use the little ParrelSync plugin I was talking about, and that'll make it very easy to basically connect between 2 instances of Unity and test everything right inside the Unity editor. And when I'm ready to play with my friends, that's when I actually go ahead, disable Mirror, enable the Bluetooth, and download it to my phones. So you can see how we can actually use a combination of these networking plugins to have the ultimate multiplayer game and also be able to be very efficient with it. Okay guys, so thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time in the Coding Shack.